atua e te ariki, e te kingi o te rangi, e te atua kaharawa. A poruki ko mātou ki a koe, a whakapētai, a whakamoiniti ki a koe ma tōku kōria. Te putanga mai o te rā tainoa ki tōna tōni tanga, o te atua noa, te tīmatanga, te whakaotinga, ka whakapaine tōna inga. Orere te atua kaha o tēnei mātou. I rau te mana o tau mana e hui hui nei. I roto i ngā pakāho, a tutuia nei i tēnei rā. Orere te atua kaha e mohi ana koe ki ngā hie katoa. E kore e ngaro i a koe te mea huna. Whakahāngi ho tau waido e ratu. E whakamāra mai o mātou ngā kau, kia tika ai a mātou whakamoiniti e a mātou i a koe. Nore e hoa, tēnei mātou tuku atu, tēnei karakia ki a koe. I nui tino tāutanga, te tamo te rangi mādi e te tamo te aoha. O iu karaiki tō mātou ai ti. E hoa tōrungi a mātou e te karaiki tōrungi a mātou. E iho tōrungi a mātou. E tō mātou na mātou te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tae mai tōru rana tīrana. Kia me te tāu e whaia i whenua, kia i te anō i tōrana. O mai kia mātou aia nei e tau mā mātou. Urua o mātou hara. Me mātou e nui nei i tima e hawa o kia mātou. O hoki mātou e kore, waia. E ngai whakorangi a mātou i tino. Nā hoki te rana tika tāna. Te kāha me te kōria. Āki e. Āki āki e. Āmi. Tātou i uri. Tu mai ai.
Ngā billboards, mai nui ko hako, hako a heke na te ua, tērā moki e riki tō tātou kuia a huria ngaro atu ki roto o te kai. Bueno ko rātou katoa ko mate atu, rātou ki a rātou tātou mo ki a tātou. Te kanongi ora, koutou e te haukaia, e tēnei whare manuatira. Arei te matapihi anake o te rangi ki te rangi, ko te rangi tūhahara tēnei, tōna tāhuaranga. E tino a tāhua tēnei wha. Nō reira, me mehi atu ki a koutou e te haukainga. E wakarangatira i te rōpū mana. Kia tū tā mātou hui atau ki roto i tēnei whare rangatira. Nō reira tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, me ngā māwiwi kore tāi te haere mai, tērā noki wā mātou nei tūwaki o te peka o te raki pai whenua. No Greece te tangata, tōna waka heke he rūrai, e nohane ki roto o ingarangi, engari i ngā tau ko paore ake nei, i tino pau o te rōpū mana ki roto o te raki pai whenua. I nāenei e kai aia tētahi mate, me ana tōna ingoa ko te motor neurone disease, and me ana ona rata, tai atu ki te wāma tūwaine o mei, a mate te tama. Engari e tikana kia mihi atu ki aia. Kia mihi atu ki aia o ona mahi tautoko i te kaupapa o mana, tautoko i te āhuranga o te pani me te rawokore, me ngā kaimahi anuki o te leia. Koia tētahi tangata e tūkahana ki nui i wena pakaro rui. Nō reira e tikana kia mihi atu ki aia. Me wera atu e tautoko ana i te kaupapa kore tai te haere mai o te atatu. Nō reira, ari ana ko tae mai, kone oku kākahu kia waka mahana i te tinana, engari tae mai konei, ke konei te rangi o te taitokera. Paki ana te rā. Nō reira mihi atu ki a koutou e te kaukainga e hangane i tētahi nā mai te hiku o te ika. Nō reira koutou tātou ngā tua, o ngā tau ko paore ake nei, taino ki tēnei wā, tātou anua o te rōpū mana, i haere tāwhiti mai, kia huitahi, kia kōrerotahi, e pēhi ara mātua ngā rāke te haere mai. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Puri atu huri noa, koe aroke e taku prata no, rauko poihake nā, i hoki tāwhiti mai, taku tino kaitiahi, i ngā haere atu ki poihake nā, me atu kia pe, rurei. Tēnā. Kuri raune, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kura tātou tātou.
Ko ngā waka e nei, i hoi a mai rā, i te nuku o te whenua, i hawa ki pamama. Whakawhiti mai rā, te moana nui ati waki i o te Aroha, i ki nuku hiki rangi. Tae ke ki runga, tae nui te arawa, toko maru taki tumu a o te amaka.
Wharengitu nei te matapi o te rangi te Marae tātou nei te papa o te Aroha, tēnā kōrua, i mi ki te tangata o tēnei rohi o tēnei Marae. Rawa ko rātou mate, tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi hatu kia koe, kia koutou, te ropu mana, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Alan Johnson, and thanks very much for the invitation to be here today. Can everyone hear me?
Use the mic.
I'll stand over here by the button so that I can push the button. What I'd like to look, one of the things, I'm from Child Poverty Action Group. I'm the co-director of that, which means that sometimes I get to stand up with Hui like this, but the best thing about being a co-director is the great people I'm standing beside. And one of the strategies that we've adopted as a group is to find some fellow travellers, people who are going in the same direction as us, and work with them to build a bigger alliance. And clearly Mana is one of those fellow travellers, and we've got several others with us, and so the invitation to be part of your hui here today is very much appreciated, because I think we've got so much in common that we need to share. What I'd like to do today is to talk about the whole Feed the Kids program, or the kaupapa of Feed the Kids, and where it sits potentially politically, and where we might take that. Okay, so it really fits in well, I think, and accidentally, I have to say, with the questions that are going to happen this afternoon. So just bear with me, and I'll tell you a little story. Oops, I can't see it on here. One of the people who probably had the biggest, whose ideas probably had the biggest impact on the well-being of working people over the last century was a guy called John Maynard Keynes, and he was an English aristocrat who was an economist. And he dreamed up a thing called Keynesian economics, which was the thing that guided us through from the post-war era right through to the 70s. And to a degree created the economic foundation for the wealthiest state. And right at the end of the Second World War, they were starting to plan the new economic order, and he was part of that. And as they were planning this new economic order, he said it would not be foolish to contemplate a greater progress still. Even though they were planning things that would have huge impacts, and I think, frankly, huge improvements on the well-being of millions of people in the Western world, the reality is he contemplated something even bigger. And that's what I'm asking you to do today. That I think the Feed the Kids bill is a great step, but we need to contemplate. I'm not suggesting that that's enough, but I think we should contemplate further success still. And so what I want to do today is present the case for feeding the kids, the research case, the political case for feeding the kids and the bill, and where we might take that campaign from here. So there's two taki that I'd like to talk about today. The first one is, and it's really called the Education, as I understand, the Education, Breakfast and Lunch Programs in Schools Amendment Bill. And it's been motivated, we believe, by research that's been done by community groups. And in particular, two pieces of research that were done by CPAC, and that was the Food for Thought and the Empty Food Baskets. The Food for Thought program was done by our researcher Donna Wynn, which I had a role in, and that was basically a survey of food and school programs, mainly in Tamaki. And the Empty Food Baskets was some research done by CPAG Whangarei, and it was done about food poverty in Whangarei. And what we're really grateful for, frankly, is the way in which Hone and Mana have picked this up and given it political legs, because as an organisation ourselves, we don't have that mana and that capacity to do that. So for us, it's a huge success. All of a sudden, one of our ideas are being picked up politically. And so we're really grateful, Hone, for that courage and for the persistence you've shown in doing that. Now, the research, and I have to be frank here, because maybe you think I'm being unkind, but I can be unkind to the work that we've done because it's ours, I suppose. That the research on which the bill is based is, in my view, not particularly thorough, and it has its limitations. That is, the research we've done is probably not a very solid base on which to base this program. I'll be frank with that. The reality is that the research we've done has its limitations, partly because of its approach, but partly because, as Andrew said, we're an independent charity that largely runs on koha, not on government contracts, not on sponsorships, but on koha. And so we can't do extensive research. The stuff we do, I have to say, is quick and dirty. You know, we actually have to do what we can do, and we publicise that, and we present it in the public, but it's not particularly thorough research. And I think it's important to appreciate the limitations, simply because those limitations could become our weakness they could become the thing that trips us up. So we'll always need to be aware, I think, of where the weakness in our argument is, and that's what I want to talk about today. CPAG's approach was a qualitative approach, and to some extent it was narratively based. So what that means is it talked about things not in number terms, but in terms of degrees of things, you know, like good, bad, not too good, not too bad type of thing. And it was narrative, that is, it told stories. And it wasn't what we call quantitative, that was what it didn't have a scientific rigour to it. Although we did talk about things like program use, how many people used how many children used this breakfast program, how many did that, how many did this. But most of the thing was based on the opinions of the key informants, who were either the principals of the schools that we approached or people working on school programs. So it was really opinion based. It wasn't statistically based. And so basically, one of the things we didn't talk about was how effective the program was. That is, what did it achieve? And we didn't talk about how best to deliver those things. We didn't talk about those things. We just talked about what programs are doing and what people thought of them. But evidence isn't everything, right? All of a sudden, you know, I think the government's chief advisor, a guy called, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. Anyway, he's a government chief advisor, his friend John Keys, and he said we've got to have evidence-based policy, right? But evidence isn't everything, because this woman here, as you might know, she says, I just don't feel that we need to call for evidence and give that much kind of evidence to something that is so obvious. Much of this welfare reform right now is based on things that are obvious all the better. Apparently, it was obvious that you needed to start drug testing beneficiaries because there was a problem with drug misuse amongst the unemployed. When unions asked for evidence of that, well, there was none. It was obvious. This was what Paula Bennett was responding to. And so in some respects, and I don't do this to fuck E.T. Paula Bennett, heaven forbid, but the reality is that evidence is a movable feast. We need evidence when it suits us, and we don't need evidence when it doesn't suit us. And one of the problems we're going to have with the debate that's going to come up around this bill is that they will say there is no evidence to support the program. All of a sudden we need evidence for programs like this. We need evidence for programs that would have us feed children, but we don't need evidence that would have us run programs to drug test beneficiaries. You see, so we've got to be very careful that we have an evidence base, or we at least understand the evidence base that we're working on, because I'm figuring that the debate that's going to happen is going to be driven by this claim that there's not much evidence. And in fact, there is some evidence, and I'll get onto that soon. But our research, such as it was, said that food poverty amongst children is quite widespread, and it is probably more common than many New Zealanders imagine. That was the first thing that we decided we could say. The second thing is that directly addressing children's hunger at school improves the educational outcomes, not only for those children but for their classmates. The argument here is that every children are disruptive in class. Not only do they not learn themselves, but they often distract the class from learning as well, and that in itself is an advantage. So there was two things that we believed our research told us. One is that food poverty amongst children, particularly in lower decile schools, is more common, and that you improve educational outcomes if you provide food for children. These two ideas are essentially the basis, I think, of the food in schools program in poor communities. You know, like for example, I think that many people say, well, it's common picking up Paula Bennett's rationale that it's obvious, fairly obvious, and kids are hungry, feed them, they're going to pay attention. Okay? And as ideas, I think they've received some public sympathy and support. And I think they're useful in advancing our advocacy that greater attention be paid to child poverty. So as ideas, they're good, in my view, and in CPAC's view. But But these two ideas have some appeal, but they have some weaknesses which I think also need to be acknowledged. And they are these. The case for better social and educational outcomes has not really been made. Key informants have claimed these without any solid evidence. The principal said, yeah, we're getting better outcomes. Well, that's only their view, and you have to say, well, it's a principal knows their stuff and would be able to comment intelligently on that. But they can't offer any strong evidence of it. They can simply say it's their view. Right? So it's an expert opinion. And the question of how best to intervene has not been properly addressed either. Okay, even if we are to have these programs, how do we have these programs? Do we have state-funded programs? Do we have community-driven programs? Do we have programs that rely on corporate charity? What sort of program do we have? Because we actually haven't talked about that. But in fact, there is alternative research, and what's interesting is that the government found money, several hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think it was between $400,000 and $700,000, was put into a research project funded by the Health Research Council to look at the effect of food and breakfast programs on children's education and social outcomes. So there is some so-called scientific research for this. And these are likely, this research I think is likely to be highlighted in the forthcoming parliamentary debate around the bill. But I think that the right-wing's discussion of this is politically risky for them, which is lovely, isn't it? That they know that they are on thin ice when they start to offer opposition to this sort of idea. They know that partly because there is that apparentness, this thing that for most people they understand the link between children being hungry and poor educational outcomes. They don't need evidence, they know it. So anything the government suggests is wrong with that as an idea, and the others like United and ACT. Anything that they say about that risks them looking fairly mean, risks them looking as if they're out of touch. And so they're going to have to be very careful about how they play this as a political campaign. So to a degree the sympathy and the ideas are on our side, but not completely so. But anyway, the alternative research, as I said, was funded by the Health Research Council, and it was undertaken by researchers at the University of Auckland. And this has found the following: that there are no measurable improvements in educational and social outcomes for children involved in school breakfast programs. They haven't found any evidence. Their research went over a year and involved, I think, about 12 or 17 schools and 400 children. And they found no evidence of any improvements in reading scores or in some sort of social interaction school that they had. So that's a bit of a problem for us. The only research that's been done suggests that there's no link between feeding children and better education outcomes. I mean, you could run a bus through their research in terms of the way they approached it, but the reality is it's there. It's more scientific than CPAC's done, because of course it had several hundreds of thousands of dollars more money put into it, but the reality is it's there. And it's also suggested that levels of participation in the program were lower than they anticipated and fell off. So if kids are hungry and they're given the opportunity to participate in breakfast programs and they don't, and the ones that do become less and less over time, how important is the issue of child hunger? So that's a challenge for us as well. But what it did do, and you know, it's interesting, there has to be so much money on coming up with a piece of research that tells you this, that the children weren't as hungry as a result of the programs. The only thing that they could say is, well, fewer children reported being hungry. Well, that's fairly apparent, isn't it? Because you gave them some food. But the reality was, that's the only outcome they can identify with the program. And of course, in itself, that's not a bad outcome. You know, no one's saying, oh, well, you shouldn't give them food now because, you know, it's not going to improve their education outcomes, so why bother feeding them? You know, I don't think that's going to be the line of argument that the right wing offer in any opposition to this bill. But the reality is that was the only outcome that they could identify as being a positive outcome from the research that was undertaken. But the introduction of the bill and the debate around it, I think, has shifted the ground for us. CPAG's been around in New Zealand for nearly 20 years. And we've been banging on about child poverty all that time. And before I arrived, and even after I've been involved for about 10 years, we were largely criticised as being out of touch, talking about poverty in New Zealand and how on earth could we talk about such things because they didn't exist. Even the Labour government, frankly, denied that poverty existed in this country. Right? All of a sudden, what we've done, of course, is shifted the debate. Not just CPAC, but others as well, including Mana, have shifted the debate. Now the government has to have a ministerial inquiry into poverty. So the word poverty's got into the political agenda. So that's a huge change for us, that we're actually talking, at least they're acknowledging the issues that we're raising now. And we think that this bill is another huge step for us. And we think that